You could say this entire course is based on the AA saying, fake it till you make it. In the self-help world, I have read many times this equation. Beliefs lead to thoughts, which lead to actions. I recently stumbled upon this brilliant scientist named Dr. Andrew Huberman. He is a professor at Stanford, and he's a neuroscientist. And what he studied with his colleagues is the idea that this equation, beliefs lead to thoughts, lead to actions, actually works in both directions. So if we take that equation as the way to change our behavior, we can, instead of doing the lifelong work of going deep into our beliefs and unearthing all of our childhood traumas and dramas and the reason why we do the things we do and blaming our parents and all of that fun stuff. I mean, don't stop doing it because it's obviously fun. We can just take action. We can just fake it till we make it and have the same effect on changing our lives. So in their studies, they gave participants the option to do a thing that they were afraid of. And what they discovered is that a way that they could overcome fear was just by doing the thing instead of going in and unearthing where the fear came from and practicing all of these other things to, fix the fear. I can't explain that well enough to even try to explain it. I'm going to put a link below so that you can actually hear the scientist explain it to you. What I took away from his research is that we want to work this equation from both ends. We want to do the deep work. I want to know why I do the things that I do. I think I'm very interesting. I bet you think the same thing about yourself. That's why you're here. So I want to do that deep work. I want to go in and explore my beliefs and find out why I do what I do. But I also want to get shit done. So we are putting together a plan where we can take action in the direction of our dreams, in the direction of creating a sustainable life for ourselves as artists, while at the same time doing the deep work to explore our beliefs and figure out how we can just shift our perception and have our beliefs align with our dreams. Here's a little lesson on dopamine and motivation. For a really long time, it was believed that every time we did something that made us feel good, we got a hit of dopamine. And we enjoyed that hit of dopamine. Dopamine is a chemical that's released in your body that makes you feel nice. When we got that hit of dopamine, we were like, hey, that was cool. I want to do that again. And that's how we got addicted to things. And that's also how we became motivated to continue doing something that was giving us little hits of dopamine along the way. This is why when somebody runs a marathon, traditional training has taught them to set little goals along the way, at a mile marker or the next pole or like the next step if you have to. And that's true to an extent. But recently, scientists have discovered that, in fact, our body releases dopamine before we do the thing. So that's where the motivational aspect of dopamine comes in. That's how dopamine motivates us to do the thing. We don't only get the hit when we do the thing, we get the hit when we anticipate doing the thing as well, which is why it's very important for us to work on visualizing and imagining what our life would be like in advance of actually doing the thing. The other thing that I've learned about dopamine is that when you get a hit of dopamine, let's say in the caveman days or the cave person days, you would go out and you would hunt for the thing, okay? So here's my baseline of dopamine. And everybody's baseline of dopamine is different, but here's Mandy the caveman's baseline of dopamine. I'm going to go out and hunt for a rabbit. So I go out and I search for the rabbit, and I've got a little bit of dopamine that's there already encouraging me to search for the rabbit. I go out and search for it, and then I find it and I get the hit, and I come home and I eat the dinner and I get even more of a hit. And now I'm feeling really great because I have lots of dopamine in me. Now I finished eating the rabbit and the dopamine slowly disintegrates. I mean, it actually just completely disappears. Anyway, the level of dopamine goes down below the baseline of where I was before. Now, there's an evolutionary reason for this. When the dopamine goes below the baseline, it encourages us to try to get the dopamine back up at least to the baseline level so we can hunt again. If the dopamine was at this level already after I had the rabbit, I would have no reason to go back out and find another rabbit. I would have been like, remember that last time I found a rabbit? That was great. And then starved to death. So now it comes back down below to encourage us to go out and find the rabbit again. The problem with the dopamine motivation cycle is that when we layer different things that give us dopamine, for example, sex and drugs, not that I know anything about that. Just kidding. No, I don't. What? Hello. Okay. We have a baseline level of dopamine. The experience that we get when our dopamine is released has to do with the difference between the peak of the release and the baseline of the release. When I live a life, like the life of an artist, where there's a lot of peaks and a lot of drops, that baseline, instead of being where it was here as you were growing up and living a life of a non-artist, starts to get higher and higher. Say you're a series regular and you get a film and you're nominated for an Oscar, and your baseline, your idea of what is exciting gets smaller. So you start reaching for higher and higher things in order to still feel the feelings that you got when you were way down here, like the first time you booked a big job or the first time you won an award. What happens to people who get up into this area is that they start to layer dopamine on top of each other. I've got this big role and I'm not feeling it, so I should maybe do some cocaine or have a lot of coffee in my case, in order to try and get the dopamine levels higher. What this does is it pushes us into a state of addiction. We start to not be able to experience dopamine from basically anything but the things that are up in this realm. What things like this Time Trampoline does are help us to support ourselves, to create a more sustainable dopamine experience throughout our day by teaching us how to be present with our experiences and allow them to be what they are in the moment, and also balance them out with things that aren't so great. Like, it turns out that you do need some of these like really boring things in order to have the difference between the high points in your life and the more boring regular points in your life, help you to experience the high points when they actually happen. So there's another component to this, and that's as your baseline of dopamine goes up, when you have that peak experience, remember it's dropping back down to a level below where your baseline used to be. So it's harder to even get back and get motivated, because the motivation happens around here. It doesn't really happen around here. This is where depression and all of that other stuff starts to kick in. So it's really difficult when you just live your life on a high to be able to find sustainable joy. And unfortunately, our social media platforms, a lot of the way that we're set up to try and shape our lives are about constantly chasing those high points, when really we want our practice to be about finding joy and pleasure and just like a more consistent state of happiness in all of the various aspects of our life. So balance is really the key here.